The cabin lights dimmed to a gentle blue hue as Flight 219 cut through the night sky above the Atlantic. Somewhere over the clouds, in a row near the window, Mia sat alone, pressing her forehead lightly against the cool glass. Her hands trembled as she clutched a worn-out backpack on her lap, the same one she carried every day to the hospital, though it now held little more than an empty water bottle, a change of clothes, and a photograph of her mother. Mia's eyes were swollen from days without sleep, nights spent curled in a stiff hospital chair beside a fading heart monitor. Her mother had passed away just 12 hours ago, and now, in this pressurized capsule of strangers and silence, Mia was returning to New York with more weight in her chest than in her suitcase. She wore her fatigue like a second skin. Her hair was unbrushed, loosely tied back, her coat wrinkled at the sleeves. She didn't care. She had no energy left for small talk or polite smiles. She barely noticed the man who took the seat beside her, only offering a faint nod before turning back to the window. Her ears muffled the announcements, her thoughts drowning in the last words her mother had whispered. "Please take care of yourself now, Mia." But Mia didn't know what that meant. How do you take care of yourself when the one person who always took care of you is gone? The engines hummed beneath her feet, a rhythmic noise that seemed to match her heartbeats. Low, heavy, tired, her eyelids fluttered. She fought to stay awake, unsure why. Maybe part of her feared sleep meant letting go, admitting it was real. But eventually, exhaustion won. Her head tilted, first toward the window, then slowly, unknowingly, toward the stranger beside her. She didn't notice when her shoulder gave way and her head found his. She didn't feel his slight intake of breath or the way he turned his neck slightly to accommodate her. All she knew was, for the first time in days, her body stopped fighting, her muscles relaxed, her mind quieted. And just like that, she drifted into sleep. Not peacefully, not entirely, but enough to keep her from breaking. Liam barely noticed her at first. He was too wrapped up in his own thoughts. The job interview, the pressure of a career shift at 35, the long nights rehearsing answers in his head. He'd booked the red-eye to New York to save money and planned to review his notes during the flight. But when he sat down and caught a brief glance at the woman beside him, something shifted. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her face, pale and soft-edged under the cabin lights, was turned away, her posture curled inward like someone trying to disappear into herself. He didn't think much when her head first tilted his way. Passengers shifted all the time on flights, but then it happened again, a gentle, hesitant touch. Her hair brushed his shoulder, and her head slowly came to rest against him. Liam tensed at first. He looked down, unsure. She wasn't pretending, wasn't leaning flirtatiously. She was asleep, truly asleep, her brow furrowed slightly even in rest, like she was dreaming of something hard to let go. He could have moved, could have cleared his throat or made some awkward gesture to claim back his space, but something stopped him. There was something deeply human about the way she collapsed into rest, not lazy, not careless, just surrendered. It was as if her body had finally found a moment where it didn't have to hold itself together. Liam glanced around. No one seemed to notice. Outside, the night was endless, a black ocean dotted with faint stars. Inside, the hum of the engine became a lullaby. He slowly adjusted his arm, giving her more room, a bit more support. He shifted in his seat just enough to steady her, but not so much to wake her. Her breathing slowed. The weight of her head against him wasn't burdensome, it felt like trust, even if unspoken, even if accidental. Liam leaned his head back and stared at the seat in front of him, his resume still sitting unopened in the pocket by his knees. Whatever he had planned to review tonight could wait. There were rare moments in life when a small choice, like offering a stranger your shoulder, carried more meaning than any well-prepared answer. He stayed still, listening to her breath, silently deciding that sometimes being there is enough. Mia stirred sometime after the halfway point of the flight. It wasn't the turbulence that woke her or the ding of the seatbelt sign. It was something quieter, the realization that she felt, for the first time in days, warm, safe even. Her eyes blinked open slowly, the grogginess of deep sleep clouding her awareness. Then she felt it, a shoulder under her cheek. Her body tensed slightly and her breath caught. She straightened quickly, pulling away, mortified as her senses returned in a rush. Her heart sank when she realized what had happened. She'd fallen asleep on the man sitting next to her. I'm sorry, she mumbled, not quite able to meet his eyes. She reached for her backpack, fumbling with the straps as if that would somehow undo the last few hours. But the man, he just turned toward her with the gentlest of smiles, not bothered, not amused, just kind. "You looked like you needed it," he said simply. Mia froze, her hands fell still. That wasn't what she'd expected. No sarcasm, no awkward shifting, no impatient sigh, just understanding. She glanced at him now, really looked at him. His shirt was slightly wrinkled from where her head had been, his collar pushed down on one side. But his expression was calm, sincere. Something about his eyes made her want to cry again, though she didn't even know his name. Maybe it was because he hadn't asked questions. He hadn't needed to know her story to treat her with kindness. She wanted to say something, explain herself, but the words didn't come. How could she summarize her last 3 days? The hospital waiting room, the soft beeping of machines, the way her mother's hand had slowly grown colder in hers. The funeral plans left unfinished, the voicemail she hadn't returned. It was too much for this tiny airplane seat. So instead, she did the only thing she could. She sat still beside him, quietly, not touching this time but close enough to feel that she wasn't alone. For the first time since she lost her mother, she didn't feel like she had to carry all the grief by herself. She didn't know why a stranger's presence made such a difference. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the kindness. Maybe it was both. The wheels of the plane touched down with a soft jolt, and the lights inside the cabin brightened gradually, pulling passengers from their quiet slumber. Mia sat upright, hands resting on her lap, eyes puffy but more alert now. She hadn't spoken much for the rest of the flight after waking, but she had remained still, seated beside the man who had given her his shoulder without hesitation. She had glanced at him a few times, wanting to say something more than thank you, but finding the right words felt impossible. As passengers began rustling around them, retrieving bags and stretching stiff limbs, Mia reached into the front pocket of her backpack. Her fingers found the folded piece of paper she had tucked away just before leaving the hospital. It was her mother's last prayer note, scribbled in fragile handwriting, one corner stained from a tear that had fallen while Mia was packing up her things. The words weren't long, just a simple line: "Kindness is never wasted. Pass it on." She had folded it into a small paper crane the night her mother passed. Something to keep her from breaking down, something to hold onto when grief felt too big. Without overthinking it, Mia turned to the man, Liam, and held it out to him. He looked at it, then at her, puzzled. "What's this?" "It's something my mom gave me," she said quietly. Well, not exactly gave, she wrote it before she passed. She believed that when someone shows you kindness, you should carry it forward. I don't know your story and you don't know mine, but you were there when I needed someone, and maybe you didn't know it, but that meant everything. Liam took the crane carefully, his fingers almost reverent in the way they accepted the delicate folds. He didn't speak for a moment, just nodded, eyes soft and thoughtful. "I'll keep it safe," he finally said. She smiled faintly, the first real smile she'd managed in days. There was nothing dramatic in the exchange, no music, no applause, just two people who had crossed paths at the exact moment they needed to. As the line moved forward and passengers began to file off, Mia gave him one last glance, grateful, full of something that felt like healing, and then stepped out into the terminal, a little lighter than before. The city buzzed with its usual chaos as Liam stepped into the towering office building 2 weeks later, his heart pounding beneath a neatly pressed shirt. The job interview that had once consumed his thoughts now felt secondary to everything else he carried. Most of all, the small paper crane tucked carefully inside his wallet. He had unfolded and refolded it so many times that the edges had started to soften, the creases worn like fingerprints. He didn't know why he kept it with him, only that it reminded him of something important, something he didn't want to forget. As he waited in the crowded lobby, he noticed a woman sitting across from him, visibly flustered, a toddler tugging at her coat and a stack of papers nearly spilling from her lap. She looked tired, not in the way of a poor night's sleep, but in the deep, soul-worn way that life sometimes brings. Her eyes darted anxiously from the front desk to her child to the folder in her lap. Liam didn't hesitate. He walked over and offered her the coffee he had barely touched and smiled gently. "Looks like you could use a third hand." She blinked up at him, surprised. People didn't usually stop. Not here, not in the middle of downtown where everyone was busy being somewhere. She took the coffee, smiling gratefully. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't expect kindness today." Liam just nodded. "Neither did I. But someone once reminded me it's never wasted." As he returned to his seat, he reached into his wallet and touched the edge of the paper crane again. He hadn't seen Mia since that flight, hadn't spoken to her again. But her words, her gesture had stayed. He realized now that sometimes the smallest moments, the ones without any grand meaning or plank, and leave the deepest marks. Her grief had folded into something beautiful, and she had handed it to him without expectation. And now here he was, passing it on in his own way. He didn't know if he would get the job. Maybe he would, maybe not, but something inside him felt certain that no matter where he went, who he became, or how far he traveled, he would always remember that one flight where a stranger's head rested on his shoulder, and how a simple act